I'm having a great conversation, as always, as I do with so many wonderful, wonderful composers and musicians all over the country and the world. I'm talking this evening. It's evening for me, and it's evening for Mark as well. Composer Mark Dal Porto. He is in New Mexico, correct? I got the right state? Yeah,
Yes.
New Mexico, and speaking about his 2019, hello, very recent, Navona CD release, Peace, Nature, and Renewal. And you know what? I mean, at first I thought the cover of the CD, I thought, what is this floral thing? And today, when I was really, getting myself pumped up and listening and taking notes, I found myself absolutely sucked into that image. So it works, okay, on the CD cover. Let me just throw some titles out for everybody of these pieces. And this is, as we were talking off camera, this is a kind of an eclectic example of your portfolio. Yeah, I mean, we have some choral works, we have
Yes.
two wonderful orchestral works, and we have a wind work, and we have an oboe and piano piece. Coincidentally, your wife happens to be an oboist, but we'll talk about that later. Composer Mark Dal Porto, you are on the faculty at New Mexico University, Eastern New Mexico University. By the way, what city is that near or in?
It's a small town of Portales. We're about 100 miles west of Lubbock, Texas. So near the Texas Panhandle.
So, and Portales is not unknown, but it also describes a small town. So I see. Okay, gotcha. So Eastern New Mexico University, professor of music and coordinator of music theory and composition there. You got your degrees. I mean, California State University, Sacramento, BA and MA and DMA in composition at University of Texas, Austin. So you've been to the big city, and now and now you're in Portales, composing up a storm, apparently, from this CD. These are, I need a little background. We talked a little bit about it because I'm always so curious about when did the spark happen? What was the spark? What was your story? Now you're talking where was your youth? What were the influences? That kind of thing. Not what pre-college, just that when it gets really important, when something clicks, when a light goes on. What was it? When was it?
Well, I think it was in my late teens that I felt like I wanted to be a professional musician. Both my parents were musicians, not professionally, but they were musicians. My father played the accordion, and that was actually my first instrument. My mother played the clarinet. So I started lessons on the accordion for a few years, and my brother minored in music, and my parents bought him a piano to practice on. And when I was 15, I started to teach myself the piano. I actually didn't start taking piano lessons until I was 18 and went to college at California State University, Sacramento, and Sacramento being the city where I grew up in. But I started learning a lot of popular music. That's where I started. Then I started learning about classical music. And at that point, when I started learning more about classical music in my high school years, that's when the spark was really lit. I started to experimenting with composition, and from that point on, I knew that's what I wanted to do.
And I can tell you from my age vantage, I am relieved time and time again when I speak to you young folks about about the influence of pop music and rock music and so on, and how worried I've been since I was about 32 about, oh my God, we're going to lose all these people to electric guitar and rock and roll and the Stones. What are we going to do? And those of you who look at music, I'm not being judgmental. I'm just saying, sure enough, there's something lights a bell or two in that other area of art, music, and professional music making. How insulting have I been, if anything, to anybody? Am I okay so far?
Oh, absolutely,
Okay.
yes.
But isn't that fascinating? I just think that's amazing. So, because I was just, straight-laced classical music as far, yeah, totally from the 50s. I don't know why, but it was just straight through as a classical musician. And now as I get older, I'm reviewing jazz CDs. Are you kidding me? The conductor. I mean, and bottom line is it's all music, great music for those who watch and learn from all of it. So Okay, well, that is very interesting. And growing up in that explains Sacramento. I remember a cellist from Sacramento State. I think I can't remember his name just now, but back when I was a kid, and that whole area. When did you kind of what I see your MA in theory and composition, but what about Texas? What was Austin about? What was that degree? Was it offered to you, or did you see it or spy it or have a teacher?
Well, I applied for several schools, and they gave me the best scholarship. And I was familiar with Kent Kennan because we used his orchestration book when I was an undergraduate. And I heard a lot of good things about their composition department, including Donald Grantham, who I was hoping to study with. And fortunately, I was able to study with him for a few years.
Uh-huh.
And that seemed to be the best place for me to go. And apparently it was. I really enjoyed my 2.5 years at UT Austin to get my doctorate there.
Oof. And also, having a goal. Apparently, you saw somebody you wanted to work with, and you went for it. Have I got that right? It was no coincidence. You targeted. I love that. Well, that is called getting your advanced degrees. You have a look around and you decide what you want and who's there to offer it to you, and bam, if you're lucky, as you were, you get the gig. Let's see if I've left anything out. The CD, now that I'm getting ready to launch into these pieces, but first of all, I want to know a little more about your oeuvre, forgive the French, in that these are samples. Let me read some of these pieces. Song of Eternity for orchestra. I Seek Rest for My Lonely Heart for a cappella choir. That's a beauty. I've got some notes on When Your Song Rang Out to Me for SATB choir. That's a beauty. Romance for oboe and piano for your wife. It's just gorgeous and complex. I have questions about that one, as are marriages, I guess. Spring, the Sweet Spring for SATB choir. Exotic Animals for woodwind quintet, and that is just that's something we got to talk about. And then Mystic Mountain for orchestra, which I told you off camera. It happens once in a while, but when there's just something that just turned me around, and the tears flowed, and the emotions came out, and you were a huge success with that piece. I'll tell you. But look at that sampling. What else was there, and what kind of decisions did you have to make in terms of the music you've written and what you chose for this CD?
Well, all those compositions were fairly recent, and they just all seemed to go together, and I wasn't sure of the theme. I gave it some thought, and suddenly one day the idea of peace, nature, and renewal seemed to fit all of those compositions. And so I went with that. In fact, the most recent piece was Mystic Mountain. We were going to actually have the CD without Mystic Mountain, but I thought I really don't have a good closer for this CD. And Mystic Mountain was just completed in the band version. And I thought,
I'll bet that's a beauty for band.
It has been performed a few times with band, but I thought it could be even expressive for orchestra, especially the beginning, which is for strings alone. It's very soft and quiet and very expressive. I thought, this would be a really good closer. So I'll arrange it for orchestra, and that would be my last piece on the CD.
Ain't that the way? With Bach and all the others, it's like, what have I got? I've got this, I've got that. Oh, he went out of town for 3 weeks, so I'll arrange it for. That kind of thing. Or here's what I have. Okay, I've just finished this one for band. Might sound good for orchestra. I'll sit down and arrange it for orchestra. I just love that whole process. Well, I can tell you. Of course, it jumped at. Let's talk about Mystic Mountain for a little bit. We're going to maybe work backwards, but that piece jumped out at me immediately because I knew Alan Havanas in Seattle when I was a much younger guy, and every time I see Mystic, I think of Alan Havanas, and then let alone Mystic Mountain. So I went for this. And by the way, you captured it all right. Let me go down and throw a few things at you, and then let's talk about it. We might as well. Let's just get right into the nitty gritty here. Hang on, let me get down there to it, because this one blew my brains out. Call me sentimental. Call you manipulating, about composers and how you can find that tonality thing that just drives people crazy and allows them to submit to your will. Look, very nice, gorgeous, soft, meditating, cinematic, and that is a good thing, as we all finally know. Cinematic kind of tonality is gorgeous and very accessible for the public. It's like glancing out over a large landscape. I wrote down. Go ahead, you're dying to tell me more and straighten me out here, but see what I mean? I mean, that was just from the get-go. I've got another 47,000 words. Tell me about Mystic Mountain, and give me the year of composition also, please.
Well, it was completed in 2018, early 2018, for band, and then within a couple of months, around March or so of 2018, I had the orchestral version written. And that was the one that ended up going on the CD. Originally, we were going to do the band version, but I thought, no, I think for orchestra it can be even more powerful and effective. And I'm glad I did it for orchestra as well.
But also, I conducted Seattle Wind Ensemble, which was this huge concert band in the Seattle area when I was a younger conductor. And listening to this, to Mystic Mountain, that now that I realize you wrote it also for band, I mean, it has to be a beauty in that wind and percussion tonality of a big wind orchestra. So you've got a winner on Mystic Mountain. Let me tell you, everybody, hello, whoever's out there looking for repertoire for orchestra. And by the way, I'm going to take a chance here of getting a little out of line, but it doesn't seem extremely difficult. And you know what I mean. In other words, it's difficult in all the other ways, but in terms of just note for note, what am I wrong? Or I'm thinking college orchestras, even high school orchestras. What's the deal on Mystic Mountain in terms of performance level?
It's a band work. It's probably a grade 4. It's not particularly difficult. Mm-hmm. Our own band here in Portales performed it last year, and after our first rehearsal, it seemed like they felt pretty comfortable with it.
Beautiful.
So it isn't a very difficult piece.
But it's about getting that, whatever that atmospherics are, the perfect intonation to make certain things happen. All the magic. You and I both know slow is not easy. Beautiful and meditative is not easy. But I wanted to ask, because this is just, take notes, everybody. Mystic Mountain, this is an orchestral piece that is just a beauty. It's just a beauty. And it has that huge finale that's going to make everybody just, drop dead with joy. I'm sorry. So it's gorgeous, and I want to make sure everybody knows about this piece. I'm going to go a little bit further up here because I want to talk about the other orchestral piece, because we are talking this from my point of view, and let me get up to it. We're looking at now the piece that opens the CD, Song of Eternity for orchestra. Likewise, I think what you have is this amazing orchestration thing. Where'd you pick that? Where'd you pick that? Do you have any roots for that? You know what I mean? That craft of making dance intelligent. Making a big orchestral sound, clean and clear, and of course tonalities and movement. Go.
Well, I learned orchestration the best way, in my opinion, by simply looking at scores and listening to a recording and seeing how the notes on the page transferred to the sounds I was hearing. And in particular, the music of Gustav Mahler, fantastic orchestrator. I looked at all of his symphonies. I saw what he did with the orchestra, the great clarity he was able to achieve with all of these different timbres and colors. And I think I've modeled my orchestration techniques, particularly the way Mahler orchestrated his works.
Not a bad example, and that explains a lot for me as a first-time listener to your music. Those two orchestral pieces are, I want to say hefty, and what I mean by hefty is Mahlerian hefty. There's just, there's real substance in me. I love them. There's another piece on this CD that a couple more anyway. I want to deal with the choral works kind of as at the end, but so let's deal with instrumental works for now. Let me find it here. I'm talking about Romance for Oboe and Piano. Give me a year, and it is dedicated to your wife, I assume?
Yes, yes, certainly is.
She didn't go kicking and screaming in on this one? She said, yeah, okay, you can dedicate that one. It's okay?
Yes, absolutely.
How'd that all come about? You owed her a debt for something. Come on.
Well, I told her I wanted to write her a piece in her honor, and I completed my first version in 2014. And we performed that a few times, but we felt like it could be a little bit easier and more idiomatic for the oboe. So she made some suggestions, and 3 years later I came out with a better version, which was actually easier for the oboist and may have been a little bit harder for the piano, but that was okay.
It's a big piano part, that's for sure.
Yeah, it's an orchestrally conceived piano part. And the 2017 version is the version that is on the
The
CD.
2017 version. And as I think we even talked earlier, the piano part is, I mean, I immediately thought of orchestration. As I think I told you, I mean, this is a piece that really, when in your spare time, you might consider orchestrating it as well. But it's a beauty. Let me see what I've taken down for some notes. It's not it, but it isn't all joy and happiness. There's a. Is that about marriage or something? I mean, here I have a kind of melancholic motive that the piece opens in a kind of melancholic. I don't know if that's the right word. It's very interesting. Go tell me about your brain and how it worked on getting this thing to have an arc.
Well, love has such a vast variety of emotions, and not only ecstasy and joy, but in its greater complexity, it can have mixed feelings, like you've insulted your mate unintentionally because we're so close to one another. Sometimes we say things that don't come out quite the right way. And so it's really hard to put two people together that are not perfect by any means and make it work smoothly 100% of the time. So there are some places in the piece where there seems to be some melancholy and things aren't quite in connection with one another. But hopefully, as the piece progresses more and more, particularly with a very joyous middle section, and as the last section, which is a recapitulation of the first section, it becomes more and more connected. And finally, at the very end, we get this long, evocative coda, where we finally reach the plateau where we really fully understand each other. And now from that point on, we really can make everything work beautifully.
That must be the part where I write in my notes. First of all, I write in my notes the piano part is gargantuan. In my notes, it's huge. It's really impressive. But this is the part, no doubt, in the coda that's where I write. It's lovely, simply lovely, gorgeous, fateful writing. Okay, so I guess I got it. And then there's a kind of wonderful, gentle resignation. The piano part is like an orchestral reduction, as we've discussed, and it's just a beautiful, beautiful piece. So this is always such a treat for me to discover so much new repertoire. As a review CD. That's a beauty. What do you think? Let's see, where are we? I think we're almost ready to talk. Well, okay, let's look at this wind quintet, because talk about your kind of calling card CD, which gives people a very good sampling of your work. To me, it was like the wind quintet just kind of went. I mean, it was just so different. Tell me about its how it came to be. We're talking about Exotic Animals Suite for Woodwind Quintet. It's very funny, by the way, more often than not. Exotic Birds is one movement. Exotic Snakes and Lizards is another, and then Exotic Cats. ... Go ahead, talk about it.
Well, I wanted to stretch myself a bit more. I usually don't write in the atonal idiom, but I wrote the middle movement first, the fugal movement, and I thought to myself, it really has sort of a slithering, snake-like fugue subject, so I think I could call it Exotic Snakes and Lizards. And then I thought to myself, I could make an entire suite of this, an Exotic Animal Suite. So the first movement came next, Exotic Birds, with all of these different bird calls, and again, I was trying to extend myself, so I added all of these extended techniques for the woodwinds.
Yes,
microtones, multiphonics, key slaps, pitch bends, things like that.
That's the fun part.
Oh, yes.
That's the fun part. It must be very entertaining for the public. When it's performed live, it must be very wonderful, yeah.
You see them take the mouthpiece off, or they reed off, and they crow into the mouthpiece or the reed to imitate the sounds of birds. And then the last movement, Exotic Cats. I'm a cat lover, actually. And so I use the French horn to give the sound of this roaring effect of a lion. And he's not too pleased with all these birds and snakes and lizards around, so they sort of keep getting into scuffles. And finally, at the very end, it breaks out into a wild frenzy.
Oh, that's it.
And the lion wins out at the end. He's the king of the forest.
And the feathers are left floating down. Well, that explains a lot because I see in my notes about exotic cats that it just all bloody hell broke out there at one point, and I thought, what? And then I don't get it, but I'm going to ask him about it later. So that's it. So there's more than just compartmentalization. That lion actually gets involved in the other two buckets, if you will, and causes trouble. Very, very fun. Very cute, very amusing, probably very accessible for the public. They must get a big hoot out of the special effects, especially in the second movement. Yeah.
Yeah, and most people can't really relate to atonal music. That turns off a lot of people. They think it's really sterile and it's very cerebral. But I was trying to write a piece that would be actually written for those kinds of people where they think, well, I can't listen to atonal music. I hate it. Well, I tried to incorporate humor and a program where they could relate to and see what it all means. And I think in most cases I succeeded because it has been performed a few times and people have come up to me and say, I don't like this style of music usually, but with your piece somehow I felt a connection, and that made me feel really good.
Nice, but never again, huh? I mean, was this your atonal experiment or not?
I may go that route again someday, but as a rule, I don't write in that style.
Anyway, that's just to give everybody an idea of how interesting this CD is in terms of a sampling of your gifts and talents. So where we are right now, we're about to get into the choral music. Where we are right now is there are two really, really, really wonderful orchestral pieces and I'm going to quote you, in a Mahlerian glory. Okay, how's that? Gorgeous. So in other words, you know your stuff about writing in the big orchestral genre, and we've talked about the quintet. We've talked about oboe piano, the wonderful romance for your wife. Let's look at the choral music because this is really, I think, quite unique that you have this broad a range on this CD. I mean, we all understand it, but I thought it was. I don't often run into it, and I think it's perfect. I think it's just perfect. That's the whole idea of all the blood, sweat, and tears to put together a CD. Oh, I hear a fire engine. I think. Well, I hope we don't get blasted out here. I'm living in the city. Hang on. Let me make sure I don't miss one. I'm trying to figure out where to begin. Give me 1 second. I guess we'll begin at the beginning, as in the first choral piece on the program, depending on when the fire engine leaves. The microphone on my the microphone is an whatever, not an internal mic, but an external mic. Catches everything. Everybody that walks by, I hear patter, 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 patter. Anyway. So, okay, where do you want to start? Let me figure out where I want to start. I think I do want to start at the beginning in terms of the choral pieces on this thing. Yeah, Seek Rest for My Lonely Heart for a cappella. What is the group, by the way? I'm sure it's on the CD, but I can't remember exactly. Do you?
Vox Futura.
There you go, because it's a chamber choir. It's a wonderful a cappella chamber choir. As you describe in your notes, it's from a collection of ancient Chinese poetry, the texts. I seek rest for my lonely heart. I wander toward my dwelling place, my home. I mean, talk about enigmas, and on it goes. But tell me about the origins of where you found this poem, how it got to you, where your place is compositionally in this piece.
Well, it was actually one of the poems that Gustav Mahler set for his Song of the Earth. The very last song comes from that poetry.
I had no idea. Thank you very much. I'll get my PhD. Yeah, go ahead.
So it speaks of the sense of loneliness and being away from home and wanting to return home and finding peace in nature and going to the mountains to find a sense of refuge and renewal. And then once you're able to do that, then you can go back to your residence and feel a sense of this inner joy, this spark of life has been renewed in you. And interestingly enough, the music came to me first without the words.
That is interesting.
And then I thought of the lyrics to the last song of Mahler's Song of the Earth, which comes from an anthology of ancient Chinese poetry, which he chose to set his songs to. And I looked at the last song, and those words seemed to fit perfectly. And of course, it's very hard to line up words with pre-existing music, so that was a challenge. But it seemed to work really well. Only in one or two instances where I had to change a note or two
I
to
see.
make it work with the correct number of syllables.
And just having a look around, I think you must get kind of reports now and again. This again seems very accessible for choirs to learn and perform, and
Hmm.
also very very
Yes.
gratifying because it's such a beautiful piece of work. How is the traffic? How does it have legs?
That's been performed many times, and there is no divisi, which there's
Yeah,
lots of divisi in choir music that tends to make rehearsal time extended greatly.
yeah.
So I chose to write an a cappella choir piece with no divisi. So the sopranos never divide, the altos never divide, and so
Perfect.
on. So it's just always four parts throughout.
Perfect and also very intelligent.
Mm-hmm.
You know, come on. In music, we have to think about these things. Where am I going to get this performed? How can I, and how can I design a work that's satisfying artistically and also is going to have legs? Bingo. Yeah. Um, how about when your song rang out to me? It's they talk about joyous, beautiful a
Well,
cappella stuff.
well, that was a, a bigger work, and I actually asked the engineers to add a little bit more reverb
Hmm.
to the mix to make it sound like the choir was even bigger because I wanted a really big radiant sound to increase that sense of joy and animation in the
Hmm.
poetry. But that was taken from 19th century German Romantic poetry, and the poem really spoke to me. Brentano is the name of the poet, which incidentally Mahler also used him occasionally in some of his other songs.
You know, without the glasses, I'd swear you were Mahler. I mean, no, I mean with the glasses, I'd swear you were. In other words, something big has happened about Mahler in you. The
Yes,
influence, yeah.
my favorite composer
Yeah.
of all time.
Wonderful. A very good study as well for a composer. Yeah.
Yes.
Let's see. I had something here. While you sang, you dipped yourself into the passion-filled stream of my life.
Uh-huh.
As I just make a little note. It's altogether quite a nice piece and a nice message, and just a beautiful piece of programming for an SATB choir. And again, as we've I think discussed this is perfectly preparable. There are no big mysteries, yeah, in terms of the difficulty. Not, it's very very accessible, which is exactly right. This is like high school college level, and
Yeah.
I say high school with a little hesitancy because I don't want to offend you, but my point is that we need repertoire that can be accessibly performed and appreciated, and repertoire that makes sense and has color and narration and all the rest of it. Yeah, go.
Well, all three of the choir pieces on the CD have been performed by high school
I'm sure.
choirs.
Yeah, I'm sure. So I think this is just wonderful. We've talked about the romance, spring, sweet spring.
Mm.
Go ahead. Spring, the sweet spring is the year's pleasant king. Uh, Already you're setting us up for a pleasant enough, and it has a little 3/4 lilt. You know, tell me about this
Yes.
piece.
Well, Thomas Nash is the poet here, 16th century, and again, just I found the poem some years back, and it just seemed very accessible, straightforward, which most of my music I think is that way. And it seemed to just sing out with a choir. It screamed out to me, this needs to be set for a choir with a nice jig-like quick 3/4 feel to it to give it a sort of a dance-like, happy, uh, animated quality.
Yeah, I mean, how else can lambs frisk and play? The shepherds pipe all day. How else, except with a lilt, you know? And we may hear I birds tune this merry lay. It's just a beautiful, wonderful, very period piece of work. And again, such a lovely message and such a wonderful presentation that you've created for it. As you say, it has a contagious enthusiasm, and as I said, should be performed happily.
Absolutely.
So, what
Yes.
what what have we? I think we've just about covered everything. What's going on next? What's going on at Eastern New Mexico? How do the programs work there? What are you working on?
Well, I'm actually working on a large scale piece, a symphony. I have just completed three movements, and I'm working on the fourth and last movement. And Song of Eternity actually is going to be the first movement of the symphony. And the second
Nice.
movement is a very quick scherzo type movement. The third movement is a fast, very animated, joyful movement. And the last movement recalls feelings from the first movement. So it gets that somber feel again. And I'm not quite sure how it will end up. Where does this all leading to? It could actually end with a sad ending, or the fate could be overcome, and it could be a triumphant ending. I'm still wrestling with how the symphony will end.
And you know what? This is such a prime, wonderful speech you just gave us about that thing, which is composition, and especially something as really esoteric, even as a symphony. As it says, the symphony of life and death and eternity. But in this case, you are working on a symphony. Do you think it might end up having a title, or are you just working the genre and you know what I mean? Because you have an arc already. You've already described an arc, a beginning and an ending.
Yes, I don't have a title for it. It's definitely neo-romantic in style.
Nice.
And it does have an inner program.
He gave away a secret, everybody.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll find out soon enough about that inner program, yeah? Inner sort.
I look forward to seeing how it all turns out.
And by the way, what do you think? Another year? I mean, talk about for all of us, the length of what this project. You say, okay, I'm going to write a symphony, and you said that in 1915. What? When did you begin?
Well, I've been working on the symphony for 3 years now.
Which is you work on it a little bit and then put it in the drawer and go off and do something else and then come back, pull it out.
Yes, that's the way it's been going.
Yeah. It's kind of what has to happen with something that big, I would think, if you have a career also. I mean, you're a professor and all the rest of it.
Yeah, so it will be about 40 minutes long when it's all done.
Wow. Well, you're not fooling around. I guess you're going to start hunting for grants and whatnot, because of course it will have to be recorded.
Well, we'll see.
Okay. Sorry, I hate to keep putting you on the spot here.
No, that's okay.
Okay, I guess we're about done. Have I missed anything? What do you want to talk about? What do you want to say to everybody about this CD, Peace, Nature, and Renewal, and this music that's of yours that's on the CD?
Well, I think there's something in it for everyone. I wanted to write a set of pieces and put it all on a CD that people would enjoy listening to that aren't even musicians. They don't have to be professional musicians. They just maybe enjoy music, like to put something on. I think there are some pieces in there that everyone will enjoy. So I think there's something in it for everyone. Even with the atonal exotic animals suite.
Yeah.
If you can just be caught up in the humor of it all, understand the program behind all the notes, I think people that don't even like that style will find something in it that they can enjoy. So I think every piece, most people will say, there's something in that piece I like. So I hope that the CD, because it is so accessible and people respond to emotive music.
Exactly right. Hello. My tears have only dried a few hours ago from the last piece of the CD. Honestly. Anyway, like I said, I saw the movie Titanic and burst into tears. So what can I say? But that's the secret, isn't it? Get to the heart.
Absolutely. People usually don't remember meeting you so much or remembering things that you might say to them, but they certainly remember how you make them feel. And hopefully my CD can make people feel good and respond to music that touches their heart.
Wonderful. Very well put. Composer Mark Dal Porto. That's my Hispanic attempt there on you. What we have been talking about his 2019. It's a Navona release, CD release. You can look them up on the internet. The catalogs and everything. It's called Peace, Nature, and Renewal. What a wonderful opportunity to have a chat with you and meet you.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you so much, Dan, for having me.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.